There was an old saying repeated in every language that had ever reached the stars, from the crystalline choirs of the Orion expanse to the deep water kingdoms orbiting frozen giants, and every version carried the same warning even if the words changed. Never make a human say, "You pushed it now." The strange thing was that humanity had never been considered the strongest civilization in the galaxy. They were not the oldest, not the most technologically advanced, and certainly not the most numerous. Ancient empires possessed weapons capable of collapsing suns. Machine collectives calculated battles centuries before they happened, and telepathic species could break enemy morale without firing a shot. Humans ranked somewhere in the middle by almost every measurable standard. Their ships were practical rather than elegant. Their armies relied on discipline instead of genetic perfection, and their diplomats were famous for endless negotiations that often frustrated more aggressive powers. To many young civilizations, humans seemed almost disappointingly ordinary. That misunderstanding became the greatest mistake countless empires ever made. Humanity had developed a reputation unlike any other race. They would negotiate when others demanded surrender. They would forgive insults that started wars between neighboring species. They would rebuild colonies that pirates destroyed instead of seeking revenge. They would escort refugee convoys belonging to civilizations that had openly mocked them only months before. Human governments argued constantly among themselves, yet when innocent lives were threatened, those arguments disappeared with astonishing speed. The galaxy interpreted this patience as weakness. They assumed restraint existed because humans feared conflict. They believed every compromise proved humanity lacked the courage to fight. Entire military academies taught future admirals that Earth could always be pressured one step further, because history showed humans preferred peace above all else. What those academies failed to understand was that patience is not surrender, it is a decision, and decisions can change. The first empire to discover this truth was the Dominion of Kareth, whose rulers believed fear was the only reliable form of diplomacy. They seized human cargo routes, taxed humanitarian convoys, imprisoned civilian crews, and broadcast every humiliation across interstellar communication networks. Human ambassadors arrived carrying evidence, legal arguments, and offers to resolve every dispute peacefully. The Dominion laughed and rejected them each time. Months turned into years as provocations grew bolder. Border stations vanished. Medical ships disappeared without explanation. Rescue vessels returned carrying survivors whose stories horrified every neutral observer. Yet humanity still answered with negotiations, sanctions, and evacuation efforts rather than invasion. Other civilizations began whispering that perhaps humans simply lacked the will to defend themselves. Then came the attack that changed everything. A convoy of school transports carrying thousands of children from multiple species entered disputed space under universally recognized civilian protection codes. The Dominion attacked anyway, believing the political consequences would be manageable. Rescue broadcasts echoed through nearby systems, while merchant captains desperately recorded the massacre. Human fleets arrived too late to prevent the tragedy. The surviving officers did not shout. They did not threaten revenge. They quietly collected every escape pod, every damaged flight recorder, every name of every victim. Days later, representatives from every major civilization gathered expecting another desperate human plea for justice through diplomacy. Instead, the senior human delegate stood in complete silence before saying only one sentence. "You pushed it now." There was no anger in his voice, no dramatic speech, no emotional outburst, just calm certainty. The meeting ended immediately. Older species that remembered forgotten wars exchanged terrified glances before leaving without another word. Insurance corporations suspended travel through Dominion territory before any declaration of war had even been issued. Freight, Companies rerouted thousands of ships overnight. Neutral governments began evacuating embassies from systems likely to become battlefields. Younger races watched in confusion until their elders explained the meaning behind those simple words. Humans never announced revenge. They announced the end of restraint. For the first time in centuries, every human government signed the same order within hours. Civilian factories transformed into military production lines. Exploration vessels became supply carriers. Mining drones became engineering fleets capable of rebuilding destroyed infrastructure, while armies advanced. Millions volunteered before recruitment offices even opened, because humanity had spent generations preparing for the possibility that peace might one day fail. Their greatest weapon was not a secret superlaser or unstoppable battleship. It was preparation hidden behind ordinary life. Every emergency shelter became a command center. Every colony activated contingency plans practiced for decades. Every citizen already knew their role. The galaxy realized humans had never been unprepared. They had simply chosen not to unleash their full capacity. When the first fleets crossed into Dominion territory, they did not bombard cities indiscriminately. They disabled military shipyards with impossible precision, intercepted hostile fleets before they reached civilian worlds, rescued prisoners while battles still raged around them, and restored power to occupied colonies before raising their own flags. Dominion commanders discovered that human intelligence services possessed complete maps of defenses they believed were secret. Supply lines disappeared overnight. Communication relays failed without warning. Entire battle groups surrendered after finding themselves surrounded by forces that had somehow predicted every maneuver weeks in advance. Human victory came not through rage, but through relentless efficiency. Every operation served a purpose. Every casualty was minimized whenever possible. Every military target was neutralized permanently. The campaign advanced with terrifying momentum because humanity had spent decades studying not only how to win wars, but how to end them quickly enough that future generations would never have to fight the same enemy again. Across the galaxy, historians searched ancient records and uncovered forgotten patterns stretching back thousands of years. Every civilization that had forced humans beyond their final limit had vanished as a military power. Some survived as peaceful nations. Others collapsed under the weight of their own arrogance. None ever threatened humanity again. The reason was always the same. Humans never fought to satisfy pride. They fought only after exhausting every alternative. Once that line had been crossed, there was no uncertainty, hesitation, or political division left to exploit. Every scientist, engineer, medic, pilot, farmer, and citizen became part of a civilization moving with absolute unity toward a single objective, ensuring the same tragedy could never happen again. The Dominion's final transmission became required viewing in military academies across known space. Its supreme commander, once famous for mocking human diplomacy, stood before a shattered command center and admitted the mistake that had doomed his empire. We believed their kindness measured their strength. We thought every warning was another bluff. We did not understand that mercy has a limit. Those words echoed for centuries. New civilizations joining the galactic community often laughed when older diplomats advised them never to force humanity beyond that invisible boundary. Veterans would simply smile sadly and point toward the memorial worlds where the victims of the convoy attack were remembered by humans and aliens alike. They explained that the dangerous part was never human anger. Anger fades. What everyone feared was the moment humans became completely calm, looked directly at the people responsible for unimaginable cruelty, and quietly said, "You pushed it now." Because history had already proven what happened next. Negotiations ended. Excuses no longer mattered. The civilization that had mistaken compassion for weakness would soon discover that the same species willing to spend decades protecting strangers, rebuilding broken worlds, and offering endless chances for peace, possessed an equally unbreakable resolve to defend the innocent, once every peaceful path had been destroyed. That was the lesson every alien eventually learned, and those who survived made certain their children learned it as well. Respect the civilization that values peace enough to fight for it only as a last resort. Because if you ever hear those calm words leave human lips, you are no longer witnessing the beginning of a war. You are witnessing the final consequence of every warning that came before.